So the Scottish Parliament now has a pro-independence majority elected by the people of Scotland. Will the UK government respect that and grant an independence referendum?
Well, the first thing to say is you're quite right that Nicola Sturgeon and the Scottish National Party got the largest number of seats in this election. So my congratulations to Nicola and her team on their result, and also my congratulations to others who've been elected in the Scottish parliamentary elections. We now have a more diverse team in Holyrood representing different parties and different communities than ever before. And that's a good thing, a sign that democracy is strong and resilient and growing. But the priority, I think, for politicians, not just in Holyrood, but across the United Kingdom at the moment, has to be recovery from the pandemic. And Nicola Sturgeon herself made clear during the campaign that her first priority, her top priority, would be working to make sure that we can come out of this pandemic and recover.
That is, as you say, exactly the same thing as the SNP have been saying. They've said that they want to focus on the recovery from COVID. They've said that now isn't the time to push immediately for a referendum on the independence. But that wasn't quite my question about the timing. I'm asking if the principle of a second referendum on independence is something that the UK government would grant. Because right now, if you look at the SNP and if you also look at the Scottish Greens, who are another pro-independence party, there is a clear majority for independence in the Scottish Parliament. If they pass legislation in order to move to another referendum, would you block it?
No, what we're concentrating on doing at the moment is making sure that we work together to deal with all of the challenges that we face across the whole United Kingdom. Now, my mum will have woken up this morning in Aberdeen, and the first question on her mind will not have been, will we or won't we have an independence referendum? Will we or won't we have another few years of wrangling over the Constitution? The first question in my mum's mind will be, what about my grandson and granddaughter's education? What about the NHS care that my family need? What about the jobs that I hope that my grandchildren will go on to enjoy? Those are the priorities at the moment. And if we get sucked into a conversation about referenda, constitutions and all the rest of it, then we're diverting attention from the issues that are most important to people in Scotland and across the United Kingdom. And I hope that what people want from the Holyrood government and also from the Westminster government is a commitment to work together on these issues. So instead of concentrating on the things that divide, let's concentrate on the things that unite, and let's concentrate on all of us working together to serve the people who just voted for us.
I'm sorry to your mother if I'm not asking the questions that she most wants to be answered. But the question that I am asking is, if the Scottish Parliament passes a bill...
She still watches Sky anyway.
Well, that's good. I'm happy to hear that. If the Scottish Parliament does pass a bill to hold a referendum, how will you react? Will you take it to court?
Well, I think how I would react, how the people of Scotland would react to any attempt to bring forward legislation like that.
I'm asking how you would react as a spokesperson for the UK government.
Well, I think most people would react by thinking, hold on a moment. You're really saying that the priority, when we still have this vaccination programme that we need to roll out, when young people need their jabs in their arms, when we acknowledge that people have spent months out of school with learning lost and with their opportunities as a result occluded, do you think that people are really going to say, do you know what we really, really want is legislation on a referendum? It's to my mind, I'll put it gently, a slightly skewed set of priorities to imagine that is the most important issue. Indeed, as I say, during the course of this campaign, Nicola Sturgeon, to her credit, said that the most important thing was making sure that we dealt with this pandemic. And that's what we're laser focused on. And one of the reasons that I'm here in Glasgow is that the Cabinet Office, the government office in the UK government that I work for, has a new headquarters here, so that we can work alongside local authorities, the NHS and others in order to show two governments working together. And my sense actually is that for a lot of people who voted SNP, the one thing that they wanted was continuity in dealing with the pandemic and concentrating on that.
It's a very specific question. If the Scottish Parliament passes legislation to move towards another independence referendum, will the UK government block it in the courts?
No, we're not even going there at the moment. What we're concentrating on is making sure that we work on recovery.
But
Nicola Sturgeon was asked during
if
one
they
of the...
pass a bill to hold a referendum, will the UK government take it to the Supreme Court?
We're not going to go there. What I'm going to do is to make sure that we do everything we can to concentrate and focus on recovery. Because again, during the course of the election debates, Nicola Sturgeon graciously acknowledged that the Scottish Government had made some mistakes in the past. In particular, she said that they'd taken their eye off the ball when it came to dealing with the terrible problem of drug deaths here in Scotland. It's our responsibility to make sure that no one in Holyrood takes their eye off the ball when it comes to dealing not just with drug deaths, but also with the backlogs that have been generated in public services in the pandemic, and also the economy. So to go down this route, to start speculating about this type of legislation or that type of court hearing and all the rest of it, it's just a massive distraction. And as I say, I cannot believe that people who are worried about their jobs, worried about the extension of furlough, worried about what's happening to their children's education, I cannot believe that they think that the answer to all of these things is a protracted debate on the Constitution. We all know that what we need is urgent, focused action on that. So, I'm not interested in going down that blind alley. What I am determined to do is to work with Nicola and her team, and of course Mark Drakeford, to whom I also offer my congratulations, re-elected as the First Minister of Wales, in dealing with the immediate problems we face.
You're talking about not wanting to go down this blind alley. You're saying this is not what voters care about. But the very reason that I'm asking these questions is because on Thursday, the people of Scotland elected a majority of MSPs to their parliament who clearly are in favour of an independence referendum. That's how democracy works, isn't it? That's why we're talking about it. That's why it's on the table. If they pass legislation, I'm going to ask you for a third time, if they pass legislation to move towards another independence referendum, will the UK government block it in the courts?
Well, if we look at what happened during that campaign, it's important to recognise the issues that were raised and the questions that were asked. And when Nicola Sturgeon was on the BBC and she was asked, what would you say to someone who didn't want an independence referendum, but thought that you, First Minister, were the right person to steer Scotland through the next stage of the pandemic? And she said unhesitatingly, I would tell that person to vote for me. So again, Nicola herself has acknowledged, and again, I think it's gracious of her to do so, that there are people who will have voted for her because they want her to carry on with pandemic cooperation, the spirit of continuity in that area, and who are not putting independence first. The other thing, of course, is that if we look at the votes cast, if you look at the votes cast in constituencies in Scotland, more people voted for parties that were opposed to an independence referendum than those that might entertain that prospect. So, again, I think it's critically important to look at this debate in context. And again, one of the things that I think we should all be focusing on, and citizens expect us to focus on, are what are our plans in order to improve delivery in the NHS, in education, in criminal justice, in all of the areas that matter most to voters. Nobody denies that during this campaign that the number one issues were health and the economy, and that's what people expect us to focus on.
Are there any circumstances where Boris Johnson might agree to a second independence referendum?
Well, it's not an issue for the moment. Of course, the people of Scotland, as we saw in the referendum in 2014, they have that right. But it is absolutely important that we concentrate now on the issues in front of us. And of course, one of the things to bear in mind is that while Nicola Sturgeon obviously secured a good result, the SNP did not get a majority in this election, as they did in 2011. In 2011, the SNP under Alex Salmond got a majority. A referendum then followed. It's important to remember that at that time, every party in the Scottish Parliament thought that it was appropriate to hold a referendum then. The SNP did not get a majority in this election. And also, critically, we had a campaign in which all of the party leaders acknowledged that the single most important thing was dealing with the pandemic. And I think that a movement away from that would be something that voters would, I think they'd feel well, disappointed, to put it mildly, that we were not concentrating on their priorities.
At the same time, though, the reason that we're talking about this is because there is a pro-independence majority in the Scottish Parliament. If you look at the Scottish National Party and also the Scottish Greens, you're talking about people voting for many different reasons, not everyone backing Nicola Sturgeon purely on independence. I'm sure, of course, people do vote for different things. But, you know, we're talking about the Scottish National Party here. I mean, it's not exactly as if they've hidden their support for another independence referendum under a bush, is it?
Well, to be fair, they certainly haven't put it front and centre in the shop window, tied up with a big bow and said, this is our major offer. Quite the opposite.
Scottish National Party.
Again, to be fair, yes, and to be fair, the SNP and the First Minister made it clear that their priority was to deal with the pandemic. And indeed, again, to be fair to the First Minister and the SNP, week in, week out, I meet with Nicola Sturgeon, Mark Drakeford, and of course Arlene Foster and Michelle O'Neill from Northern Ireland to discuss how we can work together. And in private, we have I hope Nicola would agree, a business-like and effective relationship in making sure that we can work together, overcome our divides, and make sure that the people of the United Kingdom benefit from that joint working. So, yes, of course, the SNP has a set of policies and a set of traditions, but they also have a responsibility at the moment, which their First Minister has outlined, to concentrate on recovery. And again, we have a Queen's speech coming up in the Westminster Parliament in just a few days' time. At its heart are a series of bills and measures which will strengthen our NHS. And again, I think if you were to ask most people in Glasgow if there was going to be a conversation between the Prime Minister and the First Minister, would you like that conversation to be about the Constitution, or would you like that conversation to be about getting hospitals to do a better job, additional support for doctors and nurses, dealing with the drug death problem that we have here? I think if you had a referendum on the question of whether or not they should be talking about the Constitution or the NHS, I think it would be the NHS by a landslide, and that's what we need to do.
Well, let's talk a bit about the conversations that are going to be had between the Prime Minister and the First Minister, because Boris Johnson has invited Nicola Sturgeon to a summit with other First Ministers. Of course, this is going to be a lot about, you know, the COVID recovery and the pandemic, but do you expect independence to be discussed there as well?
Well, I would hope not, because the purpose of it is to make sure that we work together on the pressing issues that face us. Now, of course, Nicola Sturgeon, Mark Drakeford, Arlene Foster, Michelle O'Neill may well want to raise individual issues. Quite right too. It's a broad, inclusive conversation. But the aim of the conversation is to see how we can work together even better. As I mentioned briefly earlier, we have been cooperating to deal with the pandemic. We can also learn from one another. One of the things about devolution is that you can have, as they have had in Scotland and Wales, a slightly different approach tailored to the unique circumstances of each country, but under the broad umbrella of a UK-wide strategy. And in that conversation, one of the things that we can do is both learn from each other's experience over the last year, but also develop a shared understanding of where our priorities need to be in the future. How can we use the broad shoulders of the UK Treasury in order to ensure that there is the right investment in the NHS in Scotland and the right support for Scottish students to catch up on their education?
Let's talk a bit about what happens next with the recovery from the pandemic, because we're told that the Queen's speech is going to be focusing on, you know, building back. One of the areas that has been really hit hard by COVID-19 is care homes, an area, of course, where the difficulties in that particular sector have also been very much exposed by the pandemic too. Now, when he became Prime Minister, Boris Johnson said, "I'm announcing now on the steps of Downing Street that we've fixed the crisis in social care once and for all with a clear plan we have prepared." Now, this mysterious clear plan seems like it's never really appeared. Are we going to finally get a glimpse of it?
Yes, we'll be seeing more about social care in the weeks and months to come. You're absolutely right. It's a huge issue. With an ageing population, with the particular challenges that dementia, Alzheimer's and other conditions pose, we do need to make sure that we improve the operation of our social care system. We also know that while there are some outstanding care providers, people like Robert Kilgour and others, it's also the case that there are some settings which do not maintain the high standards that we'd want. So we need to look at funding. We need to look at inspection. We need to look at how we can make sure that we get the investment required. We need to look at how we can improve quality. And Helen Whately, the Care Minister, and Matt Hancock, the Secretary of State, have been developing a plan on this, and we'll be saying more in due course, absolutely.
You say more in due course. What does that mean? Is it going to be in the Queen's speech?
Well, the Queen's speech will be concentrating on particularly how we can improve the operation of the NHS, the additional funding that will be required in order to deal with the immediate problems that we face. We've got a significant backlog in the NHS, quite a
Is that a no, then?
Well, we'll be saying more in the immediate aftermath. Well, one thing I can't do is reveal everything that's going to be in the Queen's speech. I mustn't preempt Her Majesty.
At the same time, I understand you can't reveal everything, but, you know, we were told 2 years ago that there was a clear plan ready to go.
Oh, sure.
There's still no sign of it.
Well, people, I think, will appreciate that we've been concentrating, quite rightly, on the immediate challenges posed by the pandemic. People will also expect, of course, a new plan for social care to be developed, and that plan will be unveiled later this year.
OK, talking about COVID-19, Public Health England this week elevated one version of the Indian variant, the so-called Indian variant, to a variant of concern. How worried are you about this, and could it slow down the easing of the roadmap?
Well, I'm genuinely worried, as everyone should be, about the instance of variants of concern. But there's no indication at the moment that it needs slow down the relaxation that we have as part of the roadmap. The Prime Minister will be saying more about this this week. One of the things that we do is that we have a very effective testing regime. We make sure that whenever we note a spike in the incidence of any variant of concern, that we surge testing into that area. There are other options available to us in order to make sure that we can control the spread and the rate of infection in those areas. But overall, thanks to the success of the UK vaccination programme, and also the good sense of people across the United Kingdom, we can progressively relax measures. So I anticipate that the Prime Minister tomorrow will signal that we can enter the next stage of relaxation in England on May the 17th. And as the Transport Secretary indicated yesterday, that means also that some of the rules on international travel are changing as well.
Talking about those rules on international travel, what should happen to the Champions League final? Do you think it should be held in the UK now that Turkey's been put on the red list?
Well, I'm party pre here because my son is a Chelsea fan and he would dearly love to see the game played in the UK. But there are delicate negotiations that are going on at the moment. My friend, my colleague, the Culture Secretary, Oliver Dowden, is talking to people about this at the moment. And so I don't want to cut across that, but I'm sure that fans in the UK would dearly love to see the final played here in the UK.
Just finally, we're going to be talking to Diane Abbott shortly, also Ian Murray of the Shadow Cabinet soon. It's been a very difficult set of elections for the Labour Party in England. Who do you think should carry the can for it, the leader or the party chairman?
Well, I don't wish to intrude on internal debates in the Labour Party. People go into public life, people go into politics because they want to serve. And so, Ian Murray, Diane Abbott, Keir Starmer, others, while I may disagree with them on lots of issues, they want to do the best for their country. So I shan't comment about those sorts of things. I'm sure that Ian and Diane will have far more interesting things to say about that than I could possibly have.
Is it helpful to have a strong opposition for democracy?
Yes.
OK. Michael Gove, thank you very much. One of your famous one-word answers there. Much appreciated.